So I define it as things like a leader is someone who is brave enough to act on what they know to be true. Now, it's not an academic definition, so I expect that some of the worst tyrants in the world acted on what they believed to be true. But you understand from those words that it's speaking about leaders who are guided by their conscience in a way. A leader is someone who is brave enough to act, to take action on what they know to be true. A leader is any person of profound integrity who acts and behaves and makes choices in accordance with the guidance of that same integrity. We say that leadership is a choice. So you know this whole debate about whether leaders are made or whether they are educated to be leaders or whether they were born as leaders. Well, the position that I take is that leadership is a choice that people make when they care enough about something to inconvenience themselves by actually doing something about it. So I'd love you just to think of that in your own circumstances. This says nothing about whether you feel equipped to be a leader. It says nothing about the degree to which you have been trained, educated, or experienced to be a leader. It asks you basically, do you care enough about something to, as it were, put your hand up and step forward? This means that you probably take up that position without feeling ready. And I think this is a good sign of that, because I can honestly say for myself, though incidentally I do not consider myself to be a peace chief, I do consider myself to be someone on the pathway, on the journey. It is an aspiration of mine. But the moment that you make this choice, you're, in my experience, you are assailed by feelings of self-doubt and feelings of being completely unready and unequipped. And given that I am now, my next birthday, I'll be 70 years old, I have never yet felt ready for anything, really, mostly. Certainly not those things which bring me out into the public forum. I'm now speaking an awful lot, and I nearly always begin that speaking without any real sense of what I'm going to say. I don't rehearse it. In fact, I do the very opposite. I try to put myself in the right space and connect to the things that I love, and trust that in that place I will find the fluency that I need to share something of value. And of course, it doesn't always work out. So then I have to deal with the feelings of having skirted failure, or having somehow not met the expectations of others. So these are all the things which come along, I think, with the choice that is leadership. Any leadership which is not orientated about service, okay, then I would say is it probably a leadership that we don't wish to experience. We don't, I would walk away from any leader that I felt did not include that in the way that they conceive and imagine their leadership to be. It's like, in fact, this is the tragedy of how leadership has developed. I was going to say in our society, but in many ways around the world, is that it's almost become an end in itself. Like, I become a leader, that gives me influence. It probably means that I can accrue some level of wealth. I can establish myself in some way under the way that I define success and call myself a successful person. And none of this has anything to do with being in service. And in fact, creates very, very dangerous leaders who have a lot of power, but who are not necessarily using that power for anything other than their own advancement. If there was anything more terrifying at this time, it must be surely around the world, as we look at the news, various leaders who have immense power and are making decisions which appear to have very little to do with the people that they serve. So let's see. Somebody, let me just pick up this one from, is it Anto? I guess the biggest thing is doubt. Let me share a story with you here. I think it's a powerful one. I went with a number of chief execs to South Africa quite a few years ago now. And we were visiting some of the people that were around Nelson Mandela and who were engaged in that whole struggle during the apartheid era. And one of those people we met, his name's Mак Макартни, and he was in prison with Mandela. He was the leader of the sort of what was then thought of course, as the terrorist forces in the bush. And it was his decisions and his commands that sent squadrons and little small groups of his soldiers into battle, attempting to disrupt the apartheid regime. Very, very dangerous. So these decisions are decisions which put at risk the lives of others. So we met with him and we asked him, we said, Mак Макартни, given your experience as a leader of the ANC forces in South Africa during that time, what is the attribute that you believe to be most desirable in a leader? Let's say somebody that was to be your deputy. And he paused a bit and then he spoke to us, with about 6 of these CEOs with me. He said, well, first of all, I'd like you to answer your own question silently to yourself. What is the attribute that I would most seek to have in a deputy of mine who is charged with the responsibility of making decisions and choices that were of enormous importance with all kinds of potential fallout? So they did that. And then he said, okay, so my answer to that question, what is it? Most important thing I look from a deputy as a trait of leadership. He said it's self-doubt. He said self-doubt. And they were all just sort of slack-jawed, open-mouthed, looking at him because they'd all thought he was going to say self-confidence. And he said self-doubt. He said, I'm sick of it. I've had it up to here with leaders who have no questions, leaders who are full of certainty, leaders who never doubt that they have, of course, made the right decision because it's come out of their mouth. Leaders who are no longer ask questions and no longer, as it were, find themselves battling with uncertainty, paradox, and all these other things. Now, of course, some measure of self-confidence is important. But if we are to have leaders who are people that we can trust, then I think knowing that they have their humanity is just there for us to see, that they have the qualities of vulnerability, their qualities of all the things which we know as and feel ourselves in our daily lives, then this would be enormously helpful. So the fact, if you do have doubt, I would say do not consider this to be something that immediately rubs your name off the list. I would consider this to be a firm and sure sign of your humanity. The question now arises whether you run away from that, use that as an excuse to run away from the invitation to leadership, or simply turn towards it as something else that you need to meet and in some way find a better relationship with. Say, within many people who are, and I include myself in this, many of us who are, we are searching connection, we're looking perhaps for some spiritual, developing and deepening a spiritual aspect of our lives. We are attracted towards things which are not within the conventional model of leadership. Then we perhaps become attracted towards the idea of being a leader without a badge, as it were, a quiet leader, an invisible leader, all these things. And I think those things are beautiful and wonderful. However, we need to be really careful that we don't ever get stuck anywhere on the journey of bringing ourselves forward in this life. And there is an attractiveness about identifying a place where we can somehow not be too noticed and feel comfortable in that place and sometimes stay too long there. So all I would say is forever, never, do not, the demons that assault you all the time asking questions about whether you're doing enough or whether you're whatever, whether you're good enough and all these other things, they respond to engagement. They don't respond well to being ignored. If they're ignored, then they grow in strength and eventually come bursting up through the floorboards, as it were. But so engage them and always imagine that you are on a trajectory, you are on a journey, and that new things will unfold. The only important thing is that you are courageous enough to keep asking the question, where now? To navigate, looking up to the sky, seeing the North Star, which the Great Bear shows us, and then walking your journey. Ultimately, it's commitment to the journey that really helps us, I think, step forward and bring ourselves. There are two things around failure and success. It was in a particular ceremony that I was a part of, which involved 4 days without food, but much more importantly, 4 days without water, running to a tree. And in this ceremony, after one day, I'd never been a day with 24 hours with no water outside in mid-30s degrees. It was incredibly hot. And after the first day, I felt I'm never going to make it. And the second day, I thought I'm in the process of dying. By the third day, I was really altogether in a different space. And as I ran to the tree, I tripped and headlong went grinding my way through the dust and gravel of the trackway towards the tree, choking and retching and spitting and really feeling that I had reached the limits of my endurance. One of these guys knelt by me and whispered in my ear, "Mac, how do you define failure?" And as I've said on many occasions in different talks, I didn't find the question particularly helpful. All right, I'm dying, I'm gasping, I'm choking, and all the rest of it. If I could have slapped him, I might have done, And he just said, failure has got nothing to do with not reaching some goal that somebody else has given you or you have given yourself. Failure is very simply not getting up again. Get up. And I got up and I ran to the tree. So you will fail. There will be there will be times when everything goes wrong. The only thing that matters is that you get up again. Okay, so that was that on failure. Success. My experience, very few human beings are capable of withstanding the weight of success. And this is the most terrifying thing, because you see, we are invited by life to bring forward our gifts, to develop them, to bring them forward, to share them. We are not asked to hide in the shadows, we are asked to come out. And if you do that, and if you're successful, you will you will gradually become what people call successful, and you'll be rewarded and you'll like it probably. And so you should, because you will have earned it. But the thing that happens to most of us is that after a while, then we become detached, as it were, from the original creative flame and the integrity that was with us in our early stages. And we begin to become used to and rather enjoy overmuch the things that success has brought us. We begin, in other words, to imagine that we're different from other people. This is the story of in Lord of the Rings, with Gandalf and Saruman, the wizard. in Tolkien's book, we understand that the wizard Saruman was once like Gandalf, as it were, a good guy. But eventually his powers, his everything overwhelmed him. And this is what we see again and again in leaders from religion, in big business, in government, and in almost every other place. So this is the big challenge. The first challenge that we fixate on is the one of failure and humiliation and difficulty. The second challenge that comes repeatedly is the one of success.